Hi all, Chris Oliver here. I wanted to make a video about the weirdnesses of my life, the stranger things that have happened. Um, the fringe, the weird. These stories are going to start very bizarre and then trickle down to be rather mundane. That's kind of how it goes because youth. We're so much more tuned in. But I've also brought a pipe for additional gravitas and excessive dramatic pauses. One of my earliest memories, when I was about 6 years old, I was woken up in my bed when my bed started vibrating against the floor. And it was a wooden bed frame, a blue wooden bed frame on a wooden floor. So it made quite a clatter and it woke me up. And when I looked around, I saw a white light in the corner of my room where my closet was. Only child, I had my own room. And then I saw a bunch of entities, for a lack of a better word, coming into my room. There was roughly a dozen of them, and they were all kind of gathering around me and looking at me. They were 6 to 7 feet tall, and it looked like they were made of like static, like thick white TV static. They were not physical as far as it, they were there, but they were very ethereal, and they were speaking to each other in what felt like was about me. This weird kind of fast vibration clicking sound like between them. It was melodic but not musical, but the way that it was a very fast and efficient form of communication between them. Being a small child, I was of course terrified out of my mind. I'm sure even as an adult it probably would have scared the bejesus out of me. And I couldn't move, and when I realized that, I tried to scream and I couldn't scream, and that's when I just absolutely became way too terrified of whatever was going on at that point, and just passed out from fear. And I have a dual memory of what happens next, because I have one memory of slipping away, of like being carried away somewhere and slipping away from them and running into my mother's room and seeing more of them in there hovering around and above her. And I also have a memory of just waking up in my bed the next day. Second weirdest thing that ever happened to me. That's how our story begins. Next oddity was probably when I was only a year or two older, and it was before I lost my father, and he and I were at my grandmother's house, who lived by a lake, and I didn't know how to swim, so I was just watching everyone swim. And my father and his sister were talking about I hope you can hear the classic rock and the occasional off-key singing. Sorry, my father and his sister were talking about me not being in the water because I didn't know how to swim, and so my dad just picked me up off the ground, said he'll figure it out, and threw me in the water. And I did figure it out, but not until I sank to the bottom of the lake. And I remember being down there and thrashing about and panicking, and then realizing that I was okay. I was fine down there. And I remember just staying down there and looking around and being amazed that I wasn't, dying. And then I knew how to swim, and I swam up to the surface, and it was all just very natural to me from that point on. Funny how trauma brings out latent knowledge. So that kind of, lends some credibility to quantum immortality theory, but it's also not a test I've ever tested again. Oh, when I was a kid, I would often dream the days I was about to have. Not every night, but often. I thought it was normal. And there was one night that I dreamt that I was going to my aunt's house, and that I was out front with my cousin playing with some green army men, and a van pulled up, and my dad jumped out. And the next day, my mom, like, hey, I need to run some errands. I'm going to take you to your aunt's house. I'm like, okay, I think I know where this is going. So I'm out front with my cousin, playing with my army men. Van pulls up, Dad jumps out. And, my dad wasn't around much when I was a kid. And I hope I'm not about to get watered. And so I was real happy to see him. We both ran inside. And my aunt was surprised to see him there, because I remember her saying that, hey, I didn't tell you that I'd be watching him today. How did you know? What are you doing here? And I remember my father saying, well, sis, I had this dream last night that he'd be here, so I thought I should come. And, I was probably about 10 when that happened. And, there are moments in life where you feel that there's a lesson to be learned in the moment that you do not fully understand at the time, and that you should register that moment for later consideration. And that's probably the first time in my young life that I had that sensation of, this is something I will understand more later. There's something here I need to learn. I have astral projected a hole twice in my life. The first time I was in the 6th grade. I was going to PE class. I was sitting on a bench with other people, and then I was suddenly looking down upon myself and the other people. Again, I was young. It felt quite natural. Then PE class started, and I thought, well, I'm going to need my body for that. And, excuse me as I laugh at my own jokes. Only child syndrome. Yeah, I remember thinking, well, I need to get back my body for that. So I got back my body and went to PE. The only time I've ever done it, besides that, I was probably 14 or 15, and I remember just thinking, hey, I wonder if I could do that thing I did accidentally. I wonder if I could do that intentionally. And I did, and I floated up above myself, and I freaked the fuck out, and I scurried back to my body as fast as I could. I was not ready. Yeah, I lost my father when I was 12. When I was 23, I had this other memory of how I lost him. I was suddenly certain that 2 men had come and taken him somewhere, when the official story is he was, well, assassinated by the mob. That's the official story. It's strange how dual memory works, but knowing what we do about the nature of this reality, I don't feel it's strange to have dual memories, and I try to put a little weight in both, But when I was 15, I had a dream about my father, and we were outside playing basketball outside of a childhood friend's house. And I don't know why that friend, other than he might have just been the only person I knew who had a basketball hoop. But I was outside playing hoops with my father, and I went to take a shot, and I hesitated, and my father grabbed me, and he said, remember, son, Doubt is the enemy, but by the time you know that, you'll have many things to unlearn. Make myself all teary. Thank you, neighbor. This moment needed just a little bit of offbeat singing. All my life I've had this intuition that I commonly refer to as little voice. Little voice, I've never considered myself psychic per se, but little voice is always little things on occasion, and I've always just do what the voices tell me. Just do what the voices tell you. You'll be fine. There were two very distinct occasions in my 20s. The first one, I was working at a convenience store. I was the graveyard shift guy. And one night, little voice was like, "Hey, go look in the dumpster." And I'm like, "What?" Like, "Go look in the dumpster." I'm like, "All right, I'll go look in the dumpster." I go and open the dumpster. I'm like, "All right, what?" Little voice like, "Grab that bag right there and open it." I'm like, "Okay." So I grab the bag and I open it, and sitting at the very top of that bag is a note looking for my replacement. Wanted third shift, this store, yada yada. I'm like, "Well, that's good to know. Thanks, little voice." Well, you gotta trust the voices in your head, unless they tell you to burn things. That's the rule. One other beautiful occasion that little voice popped up. I got pulled over one evening driving to a friend's house, and as soon as I pulled over, little voice said, "There's a dog, but don't worry." And yeah, a cop pulls me over, and as soon as I roll down my window, the questions are just like, bam, bam, bam. "Where are you going? Where are you coming from? What are you up to this evening?" It was like, whoa, 3 questions at once. All right, well, I'm going to a friend's house where I'm going to play some board games. That's my Saturday night, officer. He's like, "Well, do you mind if we search your car?" And I'm like, "Well, okay, sure." And I should mention, for the purposes of the story, that I did in fact have a wee amount of weed, that's not a word, in my keychain. I just had this little compartment box on my keychain that I would put a little weed in sometimes. And so I'm like, "Sure, officer, you can search my car." I turn my car off, I take my keys out of the ignition and put them in my pocket like you would. Perfectly normal thing to do. I get out of my car and, I sit there for a minute and they call in another officer to watch me while my car gets searched. And so I'm standing behind my car with this other officer, and I'm just chilling out. Everything's cool. I'm like, "There's weed in my pocket, and you're not searching my person under any circumstance, so, go ahead. You can dig around my dirty car all you want." And then he pulls out the dog. Oh, and I am scared. I am just waiting for this dog to look at me and just go ballistic. I'm just like, I am carrying, and this dog is going to smell it, and I am going to say. And so the cop that was watching me goes, "Sir, you seem visibly disturbed by the presence of the dog. Is there something you'd like to tell me?" And I'm just like, it's just, "Yes, sir, what is it?" "I was bitten in the face by a dog when I was a boy, and I've been terrified of them ever since." Which is not true. No, that's not true. And he goes, "Sir, would you be more comfortable if we moved away from the dog?" "Yes, yes, I would." So we walk about 20 feet away, and I'm just like, whew. And I started just trying to make casual conversation just to make myself calm down. Like, "So, is that like your personal dog? Do they keep those dogs at the station? How's all that work?" And meanwhile, I'm trying to very carefully empty the thing of weed in my pocket on the ground just to get it off my person. And I ended up just spilling it all down my leg, but thankfully it was nighttime, so that was not obvious. But, yeah, like a little voice said, there's a dog, but don't worry. Things got really quiet. I mean, during my 30s, I was trying to be normal. I had a fiance, I was going to school, I had a job in a cubicle where I pushed buttons to make data go from point A to point B. There was one incident where I needed drumsticks for a recording session. I was taking audio engineering courses, and someone told me to ask Floyd Sneed, which is not a name I would expect anyone to recognize, but he was the drummer for Three Dog Night, the funk band from the 70s. And he was, he was pretty cool. I'm like, hey, Mr. Sneed, I'm looking for some drumsticks. Do you happen to have an extra pair I could get from you? He's like, sure, man, come out with me in my truck. I'm like, okay, sure, dude. And we get out there, and he hands me a copy of a Rolling Stone from the 1970s. He's like, read that to me. I'm like, okay, more lead than Zeppelin, more Rolling than the Stones. It's Three Dog Night. Hey. And he's like, Floyd Sneed. He doesn't actually sound like that. I just need a second voice. Anyway, he gives me the drumsticks, and as I'm walking back in the building, I realized that I had dreamt that entire encounter like a week earlier, and that really wasn't something that had happened ever since I was a child. And after my awakening, I don't know, I had to remove the line between what I was told is real and unreal, and just look at all of it as consciousness. Just one, there's, one of the biggest limitations that we're handed is, we get Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is often the truest. We're tricked not into swinging it far enough. You gotta swing Occam's razor all the way around and look real goofy while you're doing it. So yeah, things got pretty quiet. It was actually around that time that I first met Kat Darden, who was she hated the word psychic. She liked the term spiritual advisor. She was someone that my grandmother knew from a long time ago, and I didn't know why I needed to go see her and meet her, but I did. She was right about most everything. She was an interesting lady, and apparently she liked me because she came back 7-8 years later and was just in my head. This was right before the desert. I'd been horribly depressed and had terrible anxiety issues for years, and interesting progression of shadows as we go. I was lit when we started. Yeah, it was before the desert and all that craziness. I was in really bad shape. My fiance had left me years before, and I just didn't take well to it. Kind of found a place to hide and hid there, and suddenly just found myself thinking about Kat again and again and again and again. Just trying to find everything she'd ever done online. Like there's some podcasts of hers out there and whatnot. And started just feeling so much better, just so much more like myself again. Like all the negative energies that had been stuffed inside me had just been like they'd been just chased away. That was also the time that I got fascinated with conspiracy theory, which is what led to the whole desert madness, really, ultimately. But that's what led to me knowing what the hell's going on here. And that's really just a question I've been asking myself, my entire life. Yeah, I've already made an hour plus video of everything that happened in the desert, so I don't really want to go into it that much here. This is why you don't edit videos. Yeah, cat left me when I was in the desert. I saw UFOs while I was in the desert, about a dozen of them, just kind of fluttering above me, which was hilarious at the time because that was right before I fell asleep, and it had been such a long, hard day that just everything was, it's like everything's funny to me now. Everything was funny. I'm like, oh, UFOs, sure. Oh, whatever, reality, sure, UFOs. Causality broke down, okay, whatever. It was on my way back to this reality that my consciousness met some entity that my higher self instinctively referred to as my Lord. It was right before I woke up in the desert. And that day I kept seeing this face in my mind, this big, happy, smiling face of a fisherman. Well, not exactly a fisherman, but if I had to describe that face in a few words, it would be a grizzly fisherman without the goofy hat. I mean, August 12th. Never be another day like it. My housemate, I went into his room to talk to him, and his nose was to the side. Like, his nose was not in the right place. And I was like, hey man, your nose is a little off. Because what else can you say at that point? Hey, that's not where your nose goes. Your nose goes a little more like, middle of your face. And he goes, oh, and he gets up and he goes to the bathroom and he fixes it. Okay, reality. Whatever. But he then he goes, all right, I'm gonna go out for milk and bread. Like, okay, you do that. And so he leaves. And when he comes back, I meet him at the door. And I just look at him and I go, are you the man I know as, my housemate? And he goes, no. That is officially the weirdest moment of my entire life. He said no. And this isn't, within the personality of my housemate, this is not something, he would not just do this for a joke. And he came in and, we talked for a little bit, and I really wish that I'd had the wherewithal to ask better questions, or ask more questions, or ask some questions, because I've never had any of them be honest with me after that time. I mean, that was it. That one. And I don't entirely know when he left and when my housemate came back, but, haven't seen him again, as far as I know. The last weirdness has to do with when I was living on the streets. I was squatting in a building, and there was one day I went back to the building to take a nap, and when I was inside, I was laying there for a while, and I was, I went in through my usual way. I had a regular entrance that was, well, a window. I went inside and I tried to nap, and it became clear that wasn't going to happen. So I remember I called my grandmother and I talked to her for a little while, because it was in a brief period that I actually had a cell phone. And then when I tried to leave, I went back to the room that I came in, because I would always go out that way, why not? And all the furniture in the room had shifted itself, had gone from just being strewn about to perfectly placed up against the window. And it was an abandoned building, so all the windows had been boarded up for the most part, but some of them had been kicked out by previous slummers. And so that board would normally have been off the wall until I got in, but it too was nailed up against the window like most of the rooms were. So that was a little disconcerting. If I would have had my wherewithal, I even had a Bible on me, I would have checked to see if it was like an old reality room. I don't know why suddenly all this furniture went to this perfectly symmetrical positioning. But I found a different way out, and when I went back that evening, it was back to normal. Furniture strewn about. Just, okay, reality. Whatever. This feels like a very long video at this point, with a lot of pauses, but I thank you for watching it. If you've had weirdnesses in your life, maybe you make a video. It certainly feels strange pouring it all out like this. So, thanks for watching. I love you all. Stay tuned. Good luck. Have fun.